Everything begins with the red-haired protagonist Vermud, one of the soldiers of the Kingdom of Brune and Count of Alsace. His army has just suffered a disastrous defeat on the plains of Dinant, and he is alone amidst the bodies. In a last attempt to drive off the enemy, he shoots an arrow at a knight named Eleonora Voltaria, the victorious commander. But she is no ordinary warrior. She is one of the 7 Vanitas, powerful warriors with great political influence, ranking just below the king himself. That being said, it is to be expected that 2 measly arrows stand no chance against her, and the young man is captured. We then see a scene from moments before the battle that decimated Brune's forces, introducing us to a bully named Zion and a lord named Moshes. But this moment is just a dream of the protagonist, who is awakened by Lim, Eleonora's personal bodyguard. The scene quickly shifts to the Kingdom of Brune, where we see the protagonist's maid and childhood friend shocked to learn of his capture. They must pay an exorbitant ransom, or he will become the property of the Kingdom of Zekted. Meanwhile, our prisoner is forced to demonstrate his archery skills, during which he shoots 2 arrows far from the target, leading everyone to mock him because they gave him a battered bow to train. However, in the middle of the demonstration, an assassin appears to attack Eleonora, who uses the power of her magic weapon to block the attack. And since Vermud had already adapted to the crooked bow he received, he demonstrates his skill by hitting the assassin in the foot from over 300 meters away. After this, Eleonora apologizes to the redhead and prepares to execute Rurik and other archers for disrespect during the archery demonstration. However, Vermud finds this excessive and asks that they be spared this time. Over time, the protagonist adapts to his new life in Leitmeritz, becoming popular among some servants, especially Rurik, who was forced to shave his head. While looking for a place to bathe, he encounters a baby dragon, Eleonora's pet, and sees her bathing naked. Classic anime scene, right? Best part is the girl has attitude, doesn't lose her poise out of embarrassment, and is quite direct about what she wants for herself. Imagine the fire this warrior must have, huh? So much that at night, Vermud is reflecting on Eleonora's conversation when bald-headed Rurik calls him, commenting that someone from Brune has been captured. The prisoner is Bertrand, Vermud's servant, who came to inform him that Alsace will be invaded by 3,000 soldiers from Zekted. After all, a leaderless fief is coveted even by allies, so he decides to return to his homeland despite his colleagues' pleas. After all, the guy is still a prisoner of war, right? He reaches the castle gate but is stopped by Eleonora herself, who explains that leaving in the dead of night would be imprudent. But the man is also an alpha male, determined to leave, demanding she open the gates. Of course, she retorts, not only because he is her prisoner, but also because he is just one man against 3,000 soldiers. Going without reinforcement would be mere suicide. So he negotiates a loan of some soldiers for his ransom in exchange for the governing rights to the entire territory of Alsace, provided she promises to govern justly. We soon learn the reasons for the attack on Vermud's lands. The king is left without an heir due to the Battle of Dinant, and there is a need for a show of strength among the lords. Thénardier, driven by power, wants to take control of Brune. Now that the people know they will be attacked, the citizens begin their flight to the forest and hills, while the Zekted invaders reach the capital, looting all goods and valuables they find along the way. But to the commander's surprise, the city was deserted, with few residents taking refuge in the sanctuary, which by direct orders from his father, could not be attacked. Zion then turns his attention to the Vorn mansion, where only Tita is found protecting a bow that is the family's treasure. She confronts him, begging him to leave, but the villain, thirsty for malice, begins to chase her, tearing her dress. Fortunately, Vermud appears to save her, shooting an arrow into Zion's hand and then jumping from the horse to rescue her. He demonstrates another skill by catching an arrow mid-flight that was about to pierce his friend's head and returning it to its attacker with a perfect headshot, while his bow cracks in this final attack. From that moment, he begins to use the weapon that has been passed down through generations in his family. With his soldiers wounded and demoralized from the first encounter with Zion's troops, Zion's army regroups on the Malchir Plains, and Eleonora sees this as an opportunity to annihilate the enemy while they are demoralized. Even at a 3-to-1 disadvantage, they choose to battle with the first Zekted infantry being decimated by the troops commanded by Vermud. But they soon reveal their trump card, an Earth Dragon. At this moment, Eleonora attacks from the flank, creating an opening to go one-on-one with the dragon, and her Vanitas title is well-deserved. With the wind power generated by her weapon, she manages to slice the dragon in half. While Zion laments the loss of the first dragon, he is informed that his enemy has just received reinforcements with troops that appear to be close to 2,000 soldiers. In emotional shock and unable to see that the soldiers are just an illusion, he orders a retreat, much questioned by his own generals. As the combat ends, Zion is cornered and requests a duel with Tigra Vermud, where it is clear that this commander is quite weak, and when he fails, he is ready to receive the final blow. But the duel is interrupted by the Zected cavalry, trying to protect their leader, giving Zion space to flee on his turbocharged dragon. At this moment, a voice from Tigra Vermud's black bow urges him to shoot the target, and even confused, he trusts his talking weapon. He positions his arrow with the power of Jerivar, aiming at the dragon and shooting at incredible speed. Think of a destructive shot, more like a Kamehameha, eliminating Zion and his dragon mid-flight, bringing the battle to an end. The next morning, Tidda ends up catching Tigra Vermud in bed, but not in an ordinary situation. Eleonora was literally holding her sword at the protagonist's mouth, and during breakfast, they discuss the next steps after the recapture of Alsace, where Eleonora will return to her kingdom for a meeting with the king. While Tigra Vermud inspects a nearby village to assess the damage from the recent war, we see Duke Thenardier devising a plan to get rid of Tigra Vermud once again, relying on Shirash's assassins and planning to use another Vanitas to finish him off. As for the white-haired warrior, she undergoes a grilling session with her king, Victor, who considers punishing her for her last-minute campaign in Brune's Lance. Luckily, Sophia Albertus, who is also a Vanitas, intervenes in the meeting and manages to persuade the king regarding her friend's actions. After the grilling, we are introduced to another Vanitas, Ludmila Laureate, who happens to have a certain rivalry with Eleonora. Once again, the voice of experience, Sophia, steps in to prevent them from making a scene in the middle of the castle, and she thanks her friend for assisting her during the meeting. We learn that favorable winds are not blowing towards Tigra Vermud, as Ludmila's family has had political ties with the Thenardiers for generations, meaning Ludmila will likely be called to fight in their favor. Back in Alsace, the protagonist receives a visit from Machus, inquiring about Tigra Vermud's next steps regarding the duchies of Thenardier and Ganelon, since both have positioned their forces in the war. The protagonist makes it clear his intention to engage Thenardier, but maintain neutrality with Ganelon, claiming his focus is not to seize Brune but simply to protect his homeland. On another day, Tigra Vermud goes to visit Ellen again, but their meeting is interrupted by Ludmila, who has come personally to meet this Duke of Alsace. She asks to have a conversation in a neutral place, and the four set off on a horseback ride. Along the way, Ludmila opens up, admitting she is allied with Thenardier and attempts to probe the protagonist about his war intentions, but before he can say anything, they are caught in a wire trap set by the assassins, and the target is the redhead. However, in the midst of the fight, Ludmila gets bitten by a venomous snake, and Tigra Vermud administers first aid. Seeing the opportunity, the assassins launch a mass attack, but Ludmila annihilates them all with the power of her ice weapon. At the end of the skirmish, they head to Rodnik, and Ludmila seeks medical assistance. Fortunately, everything goes well, and she recovers, so much so that we see her and her mistress enjoying a nice hot bath. As a thank you for helping her, she also decides to surprise the protagonist with an unexpected encounter in the bath with Ludmila. Man, I don't know whether to be proud of him or feel sorry for having friends like these. As an apology, he treats Ludmila to a delicious street food meal, which sparks a bit of jealousy in the other maiden. After finishing her meal, Ludmila leaves, and Ellen orders him to reinforce his troops in Leitmeritz, anticipating that Ludmila will maneuver her army to confront her while Thenardier maintains a new offensive in Alsace. And that is exactly what happens, and even a message from Tigra Vermud requesting a peace treaty with Ludmila's forces is refused. The confrontation is inevitable, and they engage in an initial battle on the plains of Birkna, with the first day ending without victors and with heavy losses on both sides. With the arrival of the next day, we see that Ludmila has mobilized her troops to occupy a castle in the Tatra mountain pass, a great strategic move, as the weather conditions and defensive advantages weaken Ellen's troops, who cannot breach the gates. Seeing the impossibility of moving forward, Tigra Vermud decides to scout the mountains for other paths. He uses a hunter disguise with the alter ego named Bear so as not to be recognized, which is a great idea because along the way he encounters Ludmila herself, who is hunting a fox. They share a meal and tea, conversing until sunrise. She is impressed with the skills of this mysterious hunter and even invites him to join her army, which he obviously declines, right? When she leaves, he secretly tracks her footprints, leading him to a route to a new entrance to the castle. With this, he and a small number of elite soldiers follow the protagonist to this new route, only to find that its security had been reinforced. This short girl is quite sharp and prepared, folks. In the art of swordplay, he attempts to break the defenses with his powers, but his attack is thwarted, and he is almost struck by numerous arrows. Despite losing the element of surprise, he asks Eleonora for help to make a joint strike, destroying the gate and initiating the invasion. Thus, the anticipated fight between the war maidens begins. Besides many insults, we see both exchanging countless powerful blows with their weapons in a well-balanced ice and wind fight. When both are exhausted, an assassin from Shirash's group attacks, only to be struck by an arrow to the head. With a demonstration of this skill, Ludmila realizes that the protagonist was actually that bare-dressed hunter she met earlier and questions his intentions. His sole reason is to protect his lands, and he asks Ludmila to remain neutral in this conflict. Ludmila promptly declares her impartiality and gratitude for saving her from the assassin. Meanwhile, Thénardier begins his approach from another Alsace border. He also has another card up his sleeve, which is Roland, the warrior wielding the legendary sword Durandal, who was ordered by the royal court to get rid of the Brune rebel, namely Tigrevurmud. Since the last battle, with 5,000 soldiers through different regions, they decide to name the coalition the Silver Meteor Storm Army. One of the commitments of the leader of the new army is to secure provisions for future battles. To do so, Tigrevurmud visits the city with the local lord to negotiate supplies, and during his rest by the river, he encounters the lord's daughter, and guess what? The power of protagonism runs strong in this man's veins, having an encounter with this beautiful maiden in her birthday suit. She came to meet the protagonist himself to report on her meeting with Brune's leaders, and the news is not very encouraging. The king is ill, and the current ruler of the kingdom has declared Tigrevurmud a traitor, and his rights as Duke of Alsace have been revoked. Even with the current news, the plan remains, and the next piece in this chess game is the knight Roland, and another bloody battle begins. This warrior is really tough and decimates most of his enemies. Ellen even attempts a one-on-one with Roland, but his immense power corners her, leaving no room for a counterattack. When she is on the brink of defeat, the protagonist appears to rescue her in a very well-thought-out maneuver. Tigrevurmud dodges Roland's attack while simultaneously shooting an arrow upwards as a distraction to grab Ellen and escape. Obviously, Roland doesn't fall behind and pursues him, but the previously shot arrow strikes his horse's head, leaving the commander behind. Unfortunately, that risky maneuver, though well executed, severely injured the protagonist, and now both are being pursued by enemy knights. At this moment, Sophia appears to fend off Roland and quickly disappears, allowing Tigrevurmud to escape safely. With the end of the first round, Ludmila returns with reinforcements and news about the king's condition and the management of Brune. She reveals that she cannot meet directly with the king and is informed by the prime minister that his health is critical. As the injured general commander, Eleonora promises to advance with the armada in the next battle, using the power of Arifar along with Sophia's support. With the arrival of morning, Tigrevurmud prays for a way to defeat his enemies, and his prayers are heard by his black bow. He and Titta are led to a temple that mysteriously appeared in the mist. During their exploration, Titta comments that the temple belongs to Tir Na Fal, Lady of Darkness, Night and Death. Soon after, she is possessed by the goddess herself, who challenges the protagonist to test his perseverance. The test is simple. He must shoot an arrow in the direction of his friend. Tigrevurmud manages to use the power of his bow to ensure the arrow does not harm her, dispelling the possession. Satisfied with the result, the goddess retreats as the temple disappears. After this, he is sent back into battle, where the Silver Meteors employ an interesting technique, turning the plain into a swamp by diverting water from a nearby river. This way, the enemy cavalry is immobilized and easily attacked by archers. Meanwhile, Eleonora and Sophia combine the powers of their weapons against Roland, but he proves resilient and manages to face them alone. At this moment, the protagonist also enters the battle, and even with his open wounds, he uses his new power against Roland and manages to escape with his life, but admits defeat because he no longer has the strength to lift his sword. With the enemy troops retreating, Eleonora and Tigrevurmud finally have a clear path to invade Thénardier's lands. But for this, the coalition needs to recover both physically and financially before marching to the new attack. Additionally, Eleonora receives a call for help from her friend Sasha, who is also a Vanadis. In the letter, she mentions that her lands have been invaded, and due to a treaty between the two, Eleonora must withdraw to respond to this call. Meanwhile, Roland visits the capital Nice, seeking an audience with the king, but someone within the court is manipulating politics for their own interests, imprisoning him in a room full of venomous bees, ending the commander of the royal troops. As a result, the country becomes even more vulnerable, to the point where neighboring Muisenol invades its territory, looting villages and turning villagers into slaves, which was a very dirty strategic move by Ganelon, as the invaded lands belonged to Thénardier. Of course, Tiger Vermud also needs to take a stand, because if his own enemy is defeated by the invaders, he would be the next on the list to face problems. His decision is to go on the attack, using a reduced number of men to avoid being easily detected. He conducts reconnaissance in the enemy field and notices an endless number of captured slaves, as well as very well-armed troops. On the return, he encounters a fugitive being pursued by some soldiers, who are quickly defeated, saving the life of the little blonde girl. At nightfall, the enemy commander, named Kashim, receives news that Tiger Vermud's vanguard has been spotted with about 200 soldiers, and immediately dispatches 3,000 of his men to decimate them, predicting a main battalion of 2,000 men from Brune. The next morning, the soldiers lure the enemies into a gorge for an ambush, where the protagonist again uses several dummies to create the impression of a giant army. In the following days, a guerrilla strategy is employed to gradually destroy the invading forces, a very efficient tactic that slowly reduces the number of soldiers from 20,000 to 18,000, which infuriates Kashim, leading him to resort to the classic cowardice of executing slaves to lure his attackers. When Tiger Vermud and his 600 soldiers reveal themselves in the open field, Kashim cannot believe that the redhead is the military commander until he suffers a new ambush, this time led by the Zektid army. In the midst of the confusion, a precise arrow hits Kashim's head, causing the invaders to retreat enough for the slaves to be freed. But this is just a small victory, for the main army, with 30,000 men, is marching toward them. Tiger Vermud and his men try to slow down the pursuers' advance, but with little success. By a miracle or pure coincidence, Eleonora's army appears to rescue them. Meanwhile, Eleonora reaches her friend Sasha, who, by the way, is also a Vanadis, but her health is weakened. The request for help refers to a conflict with another war maiden, Elizabeth from Mina, or simply Lisa to simplify the name. Knowing what happened, Eleonora heads to Barroso with the goal of ending this conflict. Back in the events of Brune, we see that Ludmila has formed an alliance with Tiger Vermud to fight the Muisenol invaders. Then, Tiger Vermud also visits the little blonde slave they freed in the previous battles. He even brings a snack to facilitate the conversation. Her name is Regan, and she seems a bit apprehensive around all the soldiers, except for her savior. At the end of the conversation, she also asked him a favor, which is still unknown. Later, he meets again with Ludmila for a war meeting, where she proposes a strategy to end the invaders in a single battle. In the understanding of the Petite Vanadis, they should position themselves on the Orneas hills, waiting for the enemy's advance, which was divided into 7 battalions. Battalions 1 to 4 will establish a siege on the hill, while battalions 5 to 7 will advance to pursue the group of previously freed slaves. Expecting this division, Ludmila launches a surprise attack on battalions 5 to 7, managing to completely eliminate the 5th and partially the 6th. However, the rapid organization of the attackers allowed the 7th and 6th battalions to surround them. When the fight was going from bad to worse, several allies arrived to help, reinforced with more than 5,000 soldiers, as well as old friends. Seeing the disadvantage in strategic positioning, and with the defeat of his naval fleet established at his escape point, Kier, the leader of the invaders, orders a retreat, understanding that he has been defeated. This general is intelligent. He lost 30% of his men and saw that his country has nothing to gain by continuing this conflict. Then he sent his messenger to congratulate Tiger Vermud and his coalition on the victory, and amusingly, the protagonist couldn't care less about the message. He just wanted a bed. The next morning, Eleonora sees Ludmila at the camp embracing Tiger Vermud, clearly a provocation to irritate her rival. Later, Ludmila invites him to her tent with a proposal of having some refreshing tea, saying this right in front of Ellen. It seems this story will have an interesting resolution sooner or later. As night falls, we see the protagonist and Eleonora drinking wine to celebrate the victory, where he apologizes for the loss of numerous lives from her army. The next day, during a war council meeting with Mashus, Regan appears on the scene again, and to everyone's surprise, she reveals herself to be Prince Regnis, who everyone thought was dead at the beginning of the narrative. Of course, she cannot directly prove this, but she manages to convince the protagonist with a childhood story shared between them to prove her royal lineage. They decide to take her to Artania, as there is a secret passage through a cave that only the royal family knows how to open, which would confirm her heritage. In Brune, we also see Ganelon, one of the masterminds behind these conflicts, making his predictions about the next battles between Thénardier and Tigre Vermouth, commenting that he will leave a certain farewell gift for whoever wins in the end. I'm sure it won't be anything good. Soon after, a new piece of news spreads. Ganelon's forces are crushed by Thénardier's dragons, who now march to Artania in an attempt to crush the Silver Meteor's Storm Coalition as well. Time is of the essence, and the Redhead, with his troops, departs for the confrontation. While the main force faces the enemies, Eleonora and Ludmila flank to the right to indirectly attack the 5 trained dragons. They sweep the ground with the first 3 Earth dragons, but the remaining 2 present another challenge, much stronger. The first round ends in a draw, but the game changes the next day. Incredibly, they demonstrate good synergy on the battlefield. Eleonora uses her wind power to support Ludmila, allowing her to defeat the first dragon with a thrust to the chest and another to the head. For the 2-headed dragon, she uses a similar strategy, but this time it's Eleonora who stabs her sword into the dragon's back and uses her wind power to destroy it from within. It was a tough battle, even for the Vanitas, who now rest beside the bloodied carcasses of the defeated dragons. With this small victory, Thénardier's army regroups, and Tigre Vermouth and company can rest for a moment. The next day, they are informed that there are 3 ways to reach the sacred cavern, and they choose the second, which takes them through the Mocha Temple. While exploring the cave, they come face to face with Duke Thénardier himself, who is calmly waiting for the princess's arrival. His goal is clear: to win the royal lineage and seize power in Brune. He dispatches his second-in-command to pursue Regan and Tigre Vermouth while he confronts Eleonora directly. The final boss is tough, managing to block all of Eleonora's strikes with little effort. However, in the middle of the battle, the walls and ceiling of the cave begin to collapse, forcing everyone to flee. Thénardier, on the other hand, continues to pursue Regan relentlessly, and the Redhead stays behind to protect her. Tigre Vermouth is knocked down by the commander, and just when he is about to be finished off, Bertrand jumps in front of his master to save him, taking the fatal blow. After the collapse, Tigre Vermouth discovers that his assailant was crushed by the debris and hears his old friend's last words. We shift scenes to see Regan and Eleonora running back to Artania, discovering a crater with a protagonist in the middle, still alive. We see that this hole in the ground was caused by him mastering the powers of Tir Nafal. The next morning, the Prime Minister of Brune, Pierre Baudouin, visits the coalition's barracks, informing them that the king had been poisoned by Ganelon but managed to regain his sanity, even though he is in his last moments of life. Besides informing them about the king's health, he wants to know Tigre Vermouth's next steps. He comments that his next goal is to head for the final battle against Thénardier, and after that, he will return as a hero to the kingdom. The scene shifts to the final battle, where we see the enemy forces disorganized after losing their sub-commander, and we also see the protagonist advancing to face the final boss with only a single arrow in his quiver. And imagine a confident guy, confirming that he needs just one arrow to end it all. With a single shot, he pierces the opponent's head, ending the civil war of Brune. With the conflicts concluded, Princess Regan is welcomed as a heroine, as is the red-haired commander, who can never keep his hair tidy. In his last audience, the king grants a treaty for the services rendered by Tigre Vermouth, granting the lands of Agnes to his neighbor, along with a non-aggression treaty with them for the next 3 years. As a second step, he also names Tigre Vermouth with the title of Knight Lumiere, Knight of Moonlight, traditionally granted to Brune's future leader. From this moment, Regan is recognized as the heir to the throne, taking her father's place, who will pass away in the coming days. As the credits roll, we see some characters dealing with the post-war aftermath, and Tigre Vermouth returns to Leitmeritz, doing what he knows best, archery.